Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us for Quiet Healthy Yards, a regional residential workshop. My name is Trish Glass from the nonprofit Sustainable Wellesley, and I'll be moderating this event, which is co-sponsored by the town of Lexington, Wellesley's Department of Public Works, Quiet Communities, and American Green Zone Alliance. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to run through logistics for the evening. We have an exciting and full program planned. So if you would please first sign into the chat and provide your name and your town, that will help us to know that you're here. In the chat area, you will also find a link to the workshop program and a list of speakers. As advertised, we will be raffling off a new electric tool donated generously by Husqvarna, and that will happen during the second half of the program. The winner must be present at the time of the raffle, so please stay with us. To run an orderly workshop, all participants will be placed on mute. We have lots of people in attendance, so that will make things easy. Please post any questions you have in the chat area, and I will pose them to panelists during 2 Q&A segments. I'll do my best to get to every question, but if I don't, please just reach out after the presentation. This event is being recorded so that it can be posted and shared with neighbors and friends, and perhaps with your landscaper too. We will send you each a link and some materials in the days following this. And I have one last announcement. There will be 2 hands-on equipment demonstrations on Friday, October 2nd, outdoors at Lincoln Park in Lexington. The first session will be from 10 to 11 a.m. and the second from 12 to 1 p.m. All Massachusetts COVID-19 regulations will be followed, so please bring your mask. Space is limited to 40 people per session, obviously to keep things safe. And you can register for those 2 sessions in the chat section. There's a link for you. So now to the program. I see that people are still entering. For those who have just joined us, please just sign in the chat area, and there are materials there, the program and the list of speakers. So we are thrilled to have with us tonight a guest who has special interest in the environment and in sustainability issues, State Representative Michelle Ciccolo, who represents Lexington and Woburn in the 15th Middlesex District in the Massachusetts House. Michelle, we are so happy to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you, Tricia, and thank you all for being here this evening. I'm really pleased to be able to start this off and make very, very brief remarks. You have a fantastic list of speakers ahead of you and a very full agenda, so I'll be very brief. I want to thank our sponsors and especially thank Jamie, who is Jamie Banks, who many of you know, who is a driving force behind putting this together. This is a really important topic. We all know that our environment needs immediate and urgent attention. And in the legislature, this past session, the Massachusetts House of Representatives was pleased to pass the 2050 Roadmap Bill, which for those who follow this closely, you may be familiar with the Global Warming Solutions Act, which Massachusetts passed in 2008. That required us to reduce emissions by 80%. By 2050. The 2050 Roadmap Bill that we just passed requires us to get to net zero, fantastic and very exciting, by 2050. And it also requires us to set interim benchmarks and do a host of planning to make sure we can actually meet that. So we know that it's not going to be enough to, put insulation in our homes and upgrade our heating systems and change our transportation system over. We're going to need every single sector to participate in this massive effort to really get us to reduce emissions down to net zero by 2050. And it's not just about emissions, it's also about toxics. As you'll hear from some of the speakers ahead of you, ahead on the program, there's some really bad stuff in gasoline engines, and it's the noise itself is terribly bad for our health. I'm really privileged to sit on the Public Health Committee in the legislature and the Environmental Committee. And it is increasingly evident to everyone how those two areas overlap and how important it is to make sure that we are addressing public health issues. And noise in our environment, as well as the emissions coming from these engines, are just not good for us. Plus, they make us all irritable. With COVID-19, we all know that when the landscape crews show up in our neighborhood, you can't do your work, you can't think straight. So I also want to give a shout out to the Noise Committee here in Lexington, which has been absolutely fabulous in advocating and pushing us in Lexington to try some innovative things. And they have a very, very exciting warrant article for the fall town meeting, which hopefully will help us pass a bylaw to address the leaf blowers and noise in our community. So I hope you're all following that and can participate in that. It was my privilege when I was on the select board to give them a little guidance and a little bit of encouragement, but my job's pretty easy. I just get to make some suggestions and share my enthusiasm. And I also want to do a final shout out to the Lexington DPW, which is just so ahead of the curve and doing amazing things every day with what they're doing. And you will hear from them today too. So with that, I really want to thank you all for being here. It's great to see so many friendly faces and familiar friends here. And I hope you'll enjoy today's program. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for making time for us this evening and for all that you are doing to lead on sustainability in Massachusetts. I would now like to introduce environmental health scientist Jamie Banks, who is founder and executive director of the nonprofit Quiet Communities. She's a sponsor of this event and a key organizer. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Well, thank you, Trish, and thank you, Michelle, for all your inspiration and support. It's been wonderful to have you involved with us on this issue. Oops, sorry. Hold on. And I hope you'll bear with me on the technical issues as well. I'm going to be doing all the slides for presentations for everybody. Okay, normally what I do, I'm a healthcare scientist by training, and normally I give quite a detailed presentation on the impacts of gas-powered equipment and their health impacts and environmental impacts. Tonight I will be sharing this with Regina LaRocque, who will be the next speaker. So I'm basically going to give an overview of what happens when you run gas equipment. Regina's going to go into detail on some of the health effects, and I'll talk about some of the environmental impacts as well as the different solutions that are available to us. So I know we've said thank you to everybody here, the town of Lexington, town of Wellesley DPW, our colleagues at Quiet Communities, AGSA, American Green Zone Alliance, and then Sustainable Wellesley and the Wellesley Natural Resources Commission that have been incredibly helpful in organizing and doing this workshop. Just to start, Quiet Communities, it's a nonprofit organization. We operate nationally. We have 4 programs, but tonight we're really focusing here on the Quiet Outdoors program, helping to transition the landscape industry to low noise, zero emissions practices for the purposes of health and environment. And when we talk about low noise and zero emissions, we're not just going to be talking about electric equipment tonight, but also about robotics and about people-powered tools and how practices really need to change to accommodate these new technologies and can combine to do things efficiently and effectively. As scientists, we take a scientific evidence-based approach both to looking at the problem posed by gas-powered maintenance, and also to the feasibility of different solutions and their benefits. We do a number of things, education and outreach. We actually do research, organized research. We've published in the peer review literature, presented scientific meetings. The AGSA Green Zone program, we partner with the AGSA. You'll hear more about this from Dan Mabe in our program. Government procurement, we actually worked with the state of Massachusetts, the Operational Services Division, along with AGSA, to help them to develop the first specification for commercial battery-powered equipment. So that state agencies, municipalities, and public universities could buy off of that contract. And then we have a number of other communications programs. In gas-powered maintenance, there's two types of engines, two-stroke and four-stroke. Four-stroke really describes the mowers. There's no longer any two-stroke mowers due to EPA regulations over the years. Those engines are much cleaner, they're quieter. Two-stroke engines describe all of these so-called handheld tools, blowers, trimmers, edgers, chainsaws, etc. They are very energy inefficient. They're really designed to maximize the power to weight ratio, and they have very little noise muffling. So here are some of the issues. The exhaust emissions. To start, the equipment consumes on an annual basis 2.5 billion gallons of gasoline. It produces 6 to 7 million tons per year of toxic and carcinogenic exhaust, and I'll describe those in just a moment, as well as greenhouse gases. Now, compared to other sources, power plants, traffic, industrial sources, the contribution of CO2 is quite small, but this is really low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can do something about, and it is going to make a difference. So what we're talking about here in terms of toxic and carcinogenic materials are carbon monoxide, probably well known to all of you, especially in internal spaces where it can accumulate, but this can be problematic in landscape trucks and in more enclosed settings. VOCs and nitrogen oxides, these combine to form ground level ozone. Regina will be going into some of the health problems with ozone, and then what are known as fine particulates. Now, you may know fine particulates because they are carcinogenic. They have recently been implicated in increasing rates of complications and death from COVID. So this is all because these substances can compromise lung function. There's a lot of ozone-forming pollution that comes from this equipment. These are two statements, one from the California Air Resources Board, one from the Environmental Protection Agency. The reason that it's producing so much more of this pollution than cars is that EPA has very strictly regulated vehicles, not so much with lawn and garden equipment, and there's some technical reasons for that too. So relatively speaking, it's these kinds of engines that are really producing a lot of air toxics. And then we have problems particularly with blowers. Now, what they are blowing off the ground is going to depend on where they're operating. If they're operating on highway shoulders, there could be lead, other heavy metals, trace heavy metals, which operators are going to be at risk for breathing in. And then a whole variety of other things, whether it's things sprayed on lawns or that happen to be on hard surfaces or around trees, funguses, bacteria, things that can cause allergy and lung problems. Now for the noise, 85 decibels is the occupational safety standard for noise. This equipment, you can see here, is most of this equipment, lawn and garden equipment. This comes from the Professional Land Care Network, now known as the National Association of Land Care Professionals. This is a hearing conservation program. Yes, most of it is some more than 1,000 times noisier. So workers in particular, but really all of us are at risk from the noise from these machines. Now, the machine that's really been focused on is the leaf blower. We're talking about all lawn and garden equipment today because all the two-stroke engines really are very, very polluting. They all make a lot of noise, but this is particularly egregious to residents. And there's reasons for this. It's not only the noise levels, they're used frequently. They're throttled up and down constantly. They're used many at a time, which is out of compliance with industry guidelines. And we see them all over the neighborhood for all kinds of tasks. This gives you an idea for the leading brands of backpack commercial blowers, exactly what we're talking about in terms of decibel levels. Over 100 decibels at the ear of the operator, and a minimum of 78 decibels or 76 decibels here at 50 feet. Now, even at 76 decibels, these exceed levels that are known to be safe for both non-hearing health as well as hearing health. And Regina's going to go more into the health impacts of noise. Oops, let me go back here. I think I just clicked on a hyperlink. Okay, sorry about that. A quality that makes the noise from gas blowers and actually other gas-powered engines is that there is a very strong low frequency component to the sound that carries harmful levels of noise over long distances. It has a wave that is this gradual sine wave type shape. And it has a very strong vibrational component that actually easily penetrates walls and windows. And so when we're in our houses, we're not necessarily protected from the invasiveness of this kind of sound. And it contrasts with sound from battery electric equipment, which does not have this strong low frequency component and tends to dissipate over shorter distances and not penetrate structures readily. And just a note, it's these low frequency components that are particularly dangerous to health. Now, ironically, as we're trying to tend to our landscapes and make them healthier, ground level ozone is actually very damaging to plants. And the way in which our equipment is used often is taking topsoil off of surfaces, depriving plants of nutrients, and leaving them exposed to disease. Noise, as well as pollution, is not good for our wildlife. It interrupts animal communications, prevents animals from finding reproductive partners, and there's all kinds of other things. Just as it affects our health, it affects wildlife health as well. And there are published studies more and more showing that in areas with man-made noise, I'm not just talking about this equipment, there is reduced biodiversity. A couple of other environmental hazards that people don't think about immediately is the amount of fuel that's spilled into soil and storm drains every year. Now you see here on the right this figure of 17 million gallons a year. That's a figure that came from EPA in the 1990s. We have many, many more pieces of lawn and garden equipment today. We don't have an update on that figure, but we can guess that it is much more. And this comes because when equipment is refueled, there's almost always a few ounces that get spilled. And then when things are blown, you know, organic matter, grass clippings and so forth, these are also going into our storm drains. And then there's all the maintenance products that come with gas-powered lawn and garden equipment. It's the chemicals that are used to maintain the equipment, detergents, degreasers, et cetera. It's the containers that they come in that sometimes have these chemical residues. And it's the parts, spark plugs and filters that are all gunked up. All of this goes into our landfills, and some of the chemicals may be wind up in aquifers. So there's many solutions. You may know that there's over 200 cities and towns that have enacted legislation on leaf blowers, and that's certainly reasonable restrictions can be very helpful, giving a push for a transition, but there's also a variety of other practices that can help. Mulching leaves into the ground, using sustainable landscaping to reduce areas of mowing, raking, of course, animals. And then what we're going to focus on here today as a main component for certainly for commercial, but also for homeowners, is advances in battery electric tools. So we have a lot of benefits by using these alternatives. There's no emissions at point of operation. They are much quieter, especially the quality tools. Now people say some of the electric is noisier. That's true. But knowing the right equipment to buy is important, and those tools tend to be much quieter. We don't have any of these problems of fuel spillage. You can save money on avoided fuel costs and maintenance and so forth, and reductions, no greenhouse gas emissions. And we have speakers today that are going to go into this. The technology today is capable of doing all routine maintenance work. So how do we make a successful transition? We'll wrap this up in our closing statements, but educating people about these new technologies and practices is essential. There's going to be professional certification available in the future to professionalize this business sector, knowing the selection guidelines, implementing AGSA Green Zone programs. Dan's going to be talking about that, and measuring what the benefits of that is in terms of reductions in greenhouse gases, toxics, noise, fuel spillage, all of that goes along with that program. And then there's other things that can be done to move this transition forward. We have in our own state a lot of leading by example entities. The town of Lexington, town of Wellesley is going to be following soon. Several of our universities, and then cities and towns all over the country. And again, we're proud that Massachusetts was the first state in the nation to implement a procurement contract for this equipment. And we're here to ask for your help today in helping us continue to be a leader and make our communities quieter and healthier. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Trish.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. And before we go on to the next speaker, just a reminder that if you have questions for any of the guests, please post them in the chat area. And we're going to have two sessions of questions, so type them in. So next, please welcome Dr. Regina LaRocque, an infectious disease specialist at Massachusetts General Hospital, who is also my colleague at Sustainable Wellesley. Regina will share insight into the health impacts of gas, lawn, and garden equipment for residents and also for the workers who are using the equipment. These are issues that are particularly relevant during the current pandemic. Thank you so much, Regina.
Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here speaking with all of you about a topic that is frankly of great concern to me. As mentioned, I spent 3 years serving on the Natural Resources Commission here in Wellesley, so I came to have a great appreciation for the concern that residents have around this topic. And I hope just by my presence here today as a physician, I can convey to all of you that there are legitimate health concerns related to these devices, and I hope you'll end up understanding why an infectious disease doctor in particular is concerned about this. So next slide. So what are the concerns for health with regard to gas-powered lawn equipment? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the things you've heard from Jamie. But we're concerned about noise, we're concerned about the chemicals that individuals are exposed to and the pollutants that are released through the emissions. And then we're also concerned about the material that is aerosolized in the course of blowing the ground. And I'll say a word about vibration as well. So next slide. I think, you know, whenever doctors talk about exposures to chemicals in the environment, we always like to highlight that, of course, everybody is concerned about their own individual health, but there are always vulnerable populations who we have to be especially concerned about. And that is certainly the case with gas-powered lawn equipment as well. So the people that we worry about the most are people who have existing respiratory conditions, children with asthma. We worry about pregnant women. We worry about people who are particularly sensitive to the sound effects, like children with special needs. And nowadays, I think infectious diseases are also a concern in the era of COVID, and I'm going to say a word about that. And then lastly, I just have to mention that pets also are a concern whenever we're talking about lawn care issues. So I consider all of these populations to be those at special risk. Next slide. So what exactly are we exposed to when we are around gas-powered lawn equipment? Well, there's a couple of important categories, and I just want to take a minute and explain what they are. So first of all, a big concern with any type of exposure to gas fuel are volatile organic compounds. They're called VOCs. And these are chemicals that are essentially carcinogens. There is no safe level of exposure to these chemicals when you inhale them. And I think many of us are familiar with benzene, for example. We also are concerned about the combination of these VOCs with other combustion products, particularly nitrogen oxides, because together with sunlight, they combine to form ground level ozone. And I don't know if everybody fully appreciates what ground level ozone is. We're very familiar with the ozone that exists in the atmosphere, which is a beneficial ozone that prevents ultraviolet light from reaching the ground. Ground level ozone is an entirely different matter. It is a potent respiratory irritant at any level. And so it is essentially the main component of smog. So these are potent respiratory irritants. The other thing that we worry about in exhaust from gas engines is particulate matter. And there's a picture here that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about particulate matter. So this essentially is soot, but in its smallest form. So these are the tiniest particles that result from combustion, even smaller, as you can see from this picture, than a human hair. And the smaller that these particles get, the more readily they are taken up in the lungs, and actually, as we've come to learn now, distributed throughout the body, so that there are widespread physiologic effects from inhaling particulate matter. And this is really an area of active, ongoing expansion of our knowledge. And we have come to learn in the past few years that there essentially is no safe level of exposure to these fine particulates. And they are a key element of the risk that people are exposed to when they breathe exhaust. So going to the next slide. So this is a cartoon that kind of gives you a sense of what the breadth of health concerns there are that occur when people are exposed to ground level ozone or smog and particulate matter. You know, the bottom line here is that multiple organ systems are affected. I think we're all very familiar with the fact that even short periods of exposure to these respiratory irritants can cause asthma attacks, COPD flares, other problems for people who have respiratory illness. But the thing that's worth pointing out is that we also know that cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and strokes are associated with exposure to these pollutants. And we are learning more and more that unexpected things like mental health effects and other neurodevelopmental effects also result. So the bottom line here is that there's a broad range of human health effects of exposure to these pollutants. Next slide. You know, and I encourage anybody who wants to learn more about the quality of our air in our local communities to spend some time looking at the American Lung Association, particularly their State of the Air report. You can see what the quality of the air is in your town. And you will be surprised to learn, frankly, that many of us who live in the suburban communities around Boston have levels of air pollution that exceed acceptable levels on many days of the year. And I think it's important for all of us to educate ourselves about this existing health concern. And of course, the exposure to gas-powered leaf blowers augments all of that risk in a very local, confined space. Next slide. So I think that, Jamie alluded to this, and I will mention it as well. What is special about this for me as an infectious disease doctor now? Why am I more concerned than I was before even about particulate matter? Well, I'm concerned because we have emerging evidence that really clearly associates the levels of particulate matter that people are exposed to their risk of severe COVID. And physiologically, this makes sense because we know that this is a respiratory irritant. And so I think that in this day and age, particulate matter is an extra concern. Next slide. Another thing worth mentioning is the material that is, I'll say, aerosolized in the course of the activities that are done with leaf blowers. And Jamie alluded to this in her introduction, but there are many components of soil that are put into the air because of the blowing of leaf material. And again, here, I just want to relate to you that this is another clear infectious disease concern. It is well known to those of us who take care of patients with infectious diseases that landscapers have been at higher risk of certain outbreaks of infections. So in 2000 in Martha's Vineyard, there was a very severe outbreak of a disease called tularemia, which is also known as rabbit fever, and is something that can be transmitted from rabbits to humans. And in the end, it appeared that rabbits who had been run over and aerosolized in the course of landscaping activities had led to this outbreak of disease in landscapers. So we well know that these ground source particulates pose health concerns. Next slide. I'll just say a word about noise, and I think Jamie made this quite clear, but as you can see here, many of the types of equipment that we're talking about tonight have decibel levels that exceed what are standardly considered safe levels for hearing. Next slide. And this is just to illustrate the fact that the hair cells in our inner ear are incredibly delicate structures, as you can see from the illustration here. And they are damaged when they are exposed to repeated and prolonged periods of excess noise. And this damage to the hair cells does not recover. And so this is why we see hearing loss in, well, I have a drum set behind me, but we see hearing loss in people who are exposed to high levels of noise over time. And you can't recover that function. Next slide. And frankly, chronic exposure to noise is not just about hearing loss, but it's about the physiologic effect of not having intact hearing cells. So people get ringing in their ears, they have sleep disruption. There are other effects beyond just loss of hearing. And emerging evidence, I think, especially now when people are spending more time at home, about the amount of kind of stress and anxiety that are provoked by repeated exposure to noise is a legitimate concern. Next slide. This again is just making the point that those of us who are working at home or doing school at home are spending more and more time exposed to the sounds of lawn care. And of course, our primary concern needs to continue to be the workers who are themselves at the highest risk from operating these instruments. Next slide. Another thing that occurs in the course of handling equipment that causes repeated vibration is that there can be damage to the nerves in the hands in particular. And as Jamie mentioned, the possible exposures to the solvents and fuels that are used to operate the equipment. Next slide. And as I mentioned at the top, I just will say that this is actually a concern of many professionals in the health field. Listed here are some of the professional associations that have raised concerns about the health impacts. And I include among these our own Massachusetts Medical Society, which passed a strong resolution raising concern about the health impacts of gas-powered leaf blowers. Next slide. So it's my pleasure to be here tonight to express to all of you that there are true health concerns, both for the people operating this equipment, as well as for individuals living in communities that frequently use this type of equipment. And I'm excited to see that we could all potentially use this platform to work together to make our communities healthier and cleaner and quieter for all of us. Thanks for allowing me to talk with you tonight.
Thanks so much, Regina. That was really wonderful. And I do like the idea of, creating a community around this. We all have a lot of resources to share. So next up is Dan Mabe, President of American Green Zone Alliance, AGZA. He's a co-sponsor of this event, and he's going to tell us about how AGZA's Certifying Green Zone Program training and certification courses are creating healthier, quieter neighborhoods, schools, and public spaces. Thank you so much, Dan.
And thank you for that introduction, Trish. I'm coming to you guys live. Hello, everybody, from the Eco Quiet Hub tonight. And I believe it's Concord, Massachusetts. Last night, we had a great presentation that was geared toward professionals, but tonight it's going to really speak to the people that hire these professionals and do their own yards. So with that, I know we're very pressed for time. We'll just get right into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are the American Green Zone Alliance, otherwise known as AGZA. We are a leader in low impact grounds maintenance strategies. Our mission is to transition the grounds maintenance industry to quieter and more sustainable practices. And some of the applications are commercial crews, private commercial crews, municipality schools, commercial and residential properties. Next slide, please. Okay, this is how we achieve those goals. Number one, we have our institutional green zone certification program that was mentioned. This is property transition, working very closely with quiet communities. We define, we measure, we verify, report, and then certify. And basically, we've been able to achieve some very large numbers since we started together with quiet communities as far back as 2013. I believe we are very close to exceeding over 1,000 serviceable acres that are green zone certified, if you will, AGZA Green Zone certified. Basically, we have converted entire cities where they were using all internal combustion, and now they're using mostly electric. Some have gone all electric, if you will. But the minimal requirement for an institutional green zone is to phase out all two-stroke equipment, and then we encourage them, as budgetary cycles allow, to go into the four-stroke equipment and the larger equipment. Our second program is our service professional certification, and this is education that is directed at the crews, the workers themselves, and their managers. Our third one, and it's a newer one, is our AGZA Green Zone Initiative, Residential Green Zone Initiative, otherwise known as ARGZI. This is going to highlight homeowner empowerment, a reimagined aesthetic expectation and standard, people-powered tools as a first option, and then battery, electric, and best practices. And then our fourth is our AFTC tool certification. And basically, AGZA will take tool platforms and put them through a very rugged and challenging process to make sure that we protect our audience when they go to invest in their battery equipment. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about some of the impacts. Now, I know you guys heard a lot about the impacts. I only have a few slides. And our impacts, you've seen a lot of very incredible scientific studies and slides, but here is more of a layman's look at those impacts. Here are our two most challenging issues with gas operations, our top 10. Of course, noise front and center at the top. And then emissions, top left, and then the vibration was mentioned. Coming from the grounds maintenance industry myself, I can tell you that I am suffering from numbness in both of my hands and wrists to this day. And then some of the other things that we haven't really uncovered and put front and center is the solid and toxic waste component. And that is a result of maintaining a small gas engine cradle to grave throughout its life. And then of course, maintenance, it's required that the gas equipment requires much more maintenance than their electric counterparts. And then expense, of course, electric is going to be more expensive initially, but over time, if the tools are taken care of, you will reach your return on investment and then get into what we call the gravy period. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, a layman's look at noise. This is all of us relaxing in our yard. And then here comes the gas cruise. And this is literally what that noise profile looks like. We've seen the previous slides, and as Jamie mentioned, the gas tools operate at low frequencies. They travel long distances and penetrate barriers. Now, if you were to go electric, next slide, please. This is what it looks like when George Koretz and EcoQuiet Lawn Care come to your neighborhood operating their crews in our densely populated neighborhoods, if you will. So you can see what that visual looks like, and of course the hearing is much better. Okay, let's talk about solid and toxic wastes. We shadowed 10 gardening crews for a year, and coming from the industry myself, I know what is created and what is involved with maintaining a gas fleet. One worker can basically create over 70 pieces of waste that will end up in landfills, and this is stuff that does not and cannot be recycled. And on top of that, a lot of the solvents and chemicals inside these bottles, there's of course going to be little amounts. And not only is that, is the plastic going to be in the landfills, but if there's cracks in the bottles, those oils and those solvents and those chemicals are also going to be leaching into our soil. Next slide, please. Okay, we hear a lot about worker health. I can tell you, from experience, working with gas tools has had a profound impact on my health. This is a city, we will not say who it is, but it's a city that prides themselves on sustainability, and their workers have reached out to AGSA and complained that the city has gone green with everything else, but kind of left them in the lurch. We do address worker health because I come from the industry. The gentleman on the left there, we recommended a mask that is rated for 2.5 microns and smaller. And we continue to approach the city to ask them to make changes to protect their workers. I do want to mention one thing about a couple of studies. There are studies out there where hygienic sensors were hooked up to the workers. And then we shadowed the workers all day long, and you can see what kind of exposures these workers have every single day. It comes from Fair Warning. If you go to fairwarning.org, they have the entire study on their website. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some of the positive solutions. I'm going to give a couple of our institutional programs, if you will. These are green zoning, the institutional green zoning. South Pasadena, roughly 5 years, was the first city to become AGSA Green Zone certified. They actually went all the way. The only gas use they have at this city for all city property is basically seasonal workloads like dethatching and aerating, and then heavy tree work. Next slide. All right, here's the blueprint for success when we do our institutional green zoning. We usually start with one property, and I do want to mention congratulations to the town of Lexington. They are green zoning the town hall areas, and we know that they are already looking to expand that green zone profile throughout their town. But basically, you start with one, and then you make an action plan after you have that success. All the training's been imparted, all the workers are acclimated to the equipment, and then you're able to scale and encompass your entire town, village, or city. And then, of course, here on the East Coast, Southampton was the first one on the East Coast. And what was very rewarding with Jamie is after they created 2 AGSA certified green zones, one for East Quad Village Green and one for Town Hall, it led to, in the next slide, it led to them passing legislation to outlaw all of their handheld tools, gas. In fact, they wanted to go all electric with all of their handheld tools, which is very substantial. And the gains on their inventory it's just incredible what they're achieving. Next slide, please. Okay, one very important thing is to communicate this progress. And together with Quiet Communities, we've been doing this a long time. We created this map, if you will, this before and after picture of inventorying gas fleets, and then after completing a green zone or an implementation of electric, we're able to show that metric. And it's very rewarding, and it's also used to go out and get grants and fund other projects. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we move on, this is going to be geared toward the residents now, residential homeowners and solutions, and I'm going to propose a new approach. Okay, what residential homeowners should be aware of? Of course, it's intensive gas-powered equipment operations, planting non-natives, excessive turf sizes, inefficient and wasteful watering practices. I came out here, you know, California, where I live, we were in a 7-year drought, and it was depressing. I understand that you guys are actually in a state of drought. I was very surprised to hear that. And then, of course, using dangerous chemicals for fertilizing, weed and pest control. All of these things, as a homeowner and as the person who controls ultimately what goes on your property, these are the things you should be aware of. Okay, what we're proposing is a new norm. The Quiet Communities and AGSA has taken a leadership role and started these initiatives, and we really want to inform and inspire. And we really want people to rethink what a suburban aesthetic norm should be. Of course, we take pride in our properties. We want our property values to stay high and actually increase. And we owe a lot to that to the grounds maintenance industry. But with that being said, we need to rethink if everything has to be just so perfect at a detrimental cost to worker health, the environmental impacts, and then, you know, of course, at the, you know, maintaining a perfectly manicured property. We don't want to pass the buck and kick the can down the road. Conformity, if the neighbors aren't doing something, then I'm just going to do what the neighbors are doing. We encourage people to really go off of the beaten path and try something different. Personal accountability and leading by example are big things everyone can do yourself, enact change in your community. Okay, there's ways to align with nature, planting for pollinators, growing food, composting, mulching, and eliminating chemicals and weed and pest control. And then the blueprint for success is the AGSA Green Zone Initiative, ARGZ. Next slide, please. Okay, you can use people-powered tools, rakes, brooms, ground sweepers, hand pruners, head shears, and reel mowers, battery electric tools, the full gamut, as you can see here. There are even rototillers and power washers and snow blowers now. And then of course you have all the corded electric equipment. You guys give me 1 second, my battery's running low, I gotta plug it in really quick. Okay. George, where did I put the, okay, hold on a sec. My charger for my computer.
You have it over there left?
Okay. Okay, so guys, I'm just gonna try to get through this. Hold on. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Okay, there's 3 ways you can do this. You have the do-it-yourselfers, you can hire an eco-friendly service provider, and then you can purchase equipment for your gardener who's been with you for years. You can purchase equipment for them to use dedicated for your property. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of AGSA residential green zones in the Northeast. Yes, they're mostly in New York. We were gonna have Jared speak tonight, but he could not. But basically what he wanted to impart to everyone is he's thinking about his kids, his immediate environment. And so he went out, he purchased a bundle of tools, and he is setting the example for his neighbors. Next slide, please. Here's Susan A. In Sleepy Hollow. She's putting her sign up front and center so everybody can see it. And again, this is not just to brand American Green Zone Alliance. It's basically saying, hey, this is a green zone, and it's a way to educate their neighbors and spread the good word. Okay, let's talk about AFTC, AGSA Field Tested Certified. We want to let everybody know we are truly brand neutral. However, we do want people to make the right decisions and prudent decisions. So we encourage everybody before they buy a tool to go online, do your research, look out for tools that have had recalls, safety issues, check out the warranties, everybody. Make sure that you read the warranties before you purchase. These are companies that have gone through our brutal testing, and we can say with confidence, if you choose some of these brands, which you're gonna see in a little bit, that you'll be making a good choice. And that's our presentation. I'm gonna go ahead and get a battery on this before we do some of the show and tell. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan. Dan will be back later with a cool equipment demonstration. And he'll also be running the 2 hands-on sessions in Lexington on Friday, and you can learn more about that. There's a link for registration in the chat section. Before we continue, make sure you've signed in, and also just urge you to stay with us because we will have a raffle toward the end of the program, and it's a pretty cool piece of equipment, so stay tuned. And now we have a few questions that have come in on the chat. We'll just take a couple now, and then later in the program, if there's time, we'll continue. There was an interesting question about ticks and whether leaf blowers sort of exacerbate tick-borne disease. And there's a little discussion, there is a discussion going on about, whether that's because bird nests are disrupted, but is there someone who could speak to that? Regina?
Yeah, I'll say a word about that. I find that this is a common question with regard to lawn maintenance. And I just want to say that from a health perspective, The way to prevent tick-borne illness is to take personal protective action on your own body, tucking your pants into your socks, putting tape around the intersection of your pants and socks, and wearing insect repellent on your body or clothes. I don't think there's any evidence that treating the environment is an effective way to prevent tick-borne illness. In fact, I think there's counteractive bad effects of trying to eliminate ticks in the environment. We cannot do that. They are part of the natural world. So the way to address ticks is for personal protective equipment and personal protective approaches.
May I also mention, as a also originally an infectious disease physician, but it turns out the main predators of ticks are birds. They're not insects. And since we know that leaf blowers do interrupt bird communications and disrupt their habitats, so if anything, leaf blowers would make the tick infestation worse, not better.
Thank you. And an interesting question, I guess in Brookline, there is an understanding by regulators that the sound of one leaf blower is equivalent in its effect as numerous leaf blowers. Does that make sense? So if you have one going, the damage it would do to your hearing would be the same as if you had 4 going. Perhaps Jamie or Regina or Dan could speak to that.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I'm not an acoustic engineer, but decibels are not additive. In fact, they go on a logarithmic scale, and while having more than one, let's say, blower, can be louder, it can be more annoying because they're staggering, they're throttling up and down, and that's annoying too. You're not doubling it by having 2 blowers. You're adding incrementally. So it's really that one that is producing the vast majority of the noise, and then, the others incrementally.
And just one last question before we continue. When you're talking about dangerous chemicals, someone's just asked, what are you referring to in lawn care?
Dan, can you answer that?
Dan may actually be off. We could save that one for him until later in the program. So let's just continue. There will be one more, Q&A session, as I said. So now we're going to hear from some panelists who will describe how they lead by example in their communities. I'd like to begin by introducing Nick Afshardis, who is a Lexington resident and a member of the Lexington Noise Advisory Committee, which was formed by residents seeking quieter, healthier solutions to routine residential maintenance. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Great. Thank you, Tricia. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I have my email address here in case anyone would like to note it down and ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions after tonight's session as well. So the noise committee members are appointed by the select board, and we investigate noise issues impacting the community. We engage with residents and other groups on the same interests. Last spring, we sent a bylaw proposal to our town meeting that resulted in restrictions on construction noise. Our current activities have been, exclusively focused on the gas-powered leaf blower, and we're engaging with residents and indirectly to landscapers by encouraging residents, to start a dialogue with their landscapers. And we're also promoting the use of electric lawn care machines. We're also carefully looking at what other communities are doing. And just to pick a few examples, in California, they're looking at enacting eventually a statewide ban on all gas-powered lawn machines, because pollution from gas-powered lawn machines is overtaking that from cars, making lawn machines the biggest source of pollution. Another case was what happened in Arlington, where in 2012, a town meeting passed a seasonal ban on gas blowers, and then a year later, they had to go back and repeal it and water it down. So that was kind of a flop. And then in Chevy Chase, Maryland, they recently passed a total phase out of gas blowers that's going to take effect in a few years. In Newton, Mass, they passed some restrictions that resulted in lots of complaints, and the police department actually had to dedicate a special person to deal with all the complaints. So it's not just about passing a new bylaw, that's not success, but we want to make our community a better place to live, and also to reduce the amount of friction and not create more friction. Because, as you've been hearing, there are so many adverse effects of gas blowers, we are collaborating with other people on our committee. So our committee has kind of morphed into a task force on what to do about gas blowers, and we've been joined by other interested parties, and a special thanks to Jamie Banks, Rick Rapestein, and Stella Carr and Judith Klickson for collaborating with our committee and making us a better team. So what can residents do? They can engage with their landscapers and promote the use of electric machines. You can even ask them to rake, which you might think sounds like a step backwards, but it's really much better. Electric is better than gas, and raking is even better than electric, because you're not stirring up all these particles that are on the ground. And then you can also engage with your neighbors, and I'll come back to this point in a minute. In any event, if you engage with your landscaper and they don't go quietly, pun intended, then we do have some resources available, for residents. On our committee site on the town web pages, we have a growing list of landscapers who are already using electric machines, and we'll hear from George Carrot in the next panel section. And then, it can also be difficult to start that dialogue with your neighbor, because like everyone here, we have gas blowers all around us as we sit in our homes. We receive complaints on the committee from residents who cannot even sit in their own backyard patio and work because of all the noise from gas blowers. So it can be a delicate matter to raise with neighbors, but there are some tools available. So this is a flyer that a colleague in another town sent to me, and it's got some nice colorful artwork on it, and it looks very friendly. So it can be a nice, kind of friendly way of initiating the topic, with your neighbor, and, increasing awareness and understanding. And finally, we do have a survey that is circulating around Lexington. We're trying to assess awareness and assess the level of support for placing restrictions on gas blowers. So we have a lot of responses already from residents, and we're looking forward to having more participation, because we're carefully looking at the data. We'd like everyone's input to be counted so that we can take it all into account and make our bylaw proposal more successful. So it's been a pleasure, and I'll turn it back over to Tricia.
Thanks so much, Nick. Now we'll go right to Lexington DPW Director Dave Pinsino, who's leading municipalities in the state by maintaining town lands in ways that reduce pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Dave?
All right, thank you, Trish. What I want to talk to you about is how we're doing this as a municipality here in Lexington. So we have been working with the Select Board, our Sustainability Committee, and the Noise Advisory Committee, and really trying to figure out ways, okay, how can Lexington, in their grounds division for the town, go ahead and implement some of these practices. So one of the things that we first did, we're not experts in this, so we partnered with Quiet Communities and AGSA, so both Jamie and Dan, to do an impact assessment, look at how we would initiate a transition from gas-powered to electric equipment, and then further look at that certification program that Dan had mentioned. So A couple of different things that we did. After that assessment, we presented that to the Board of Selectmen, or at that time, now they're the Select Board. Got approval to move forward. Thought that that was a good plan. We actually had some grant funding we were able to take advantage of, and you know, ready to purchase some electric equipment. One of the things we really wanted to stress with our staff was involving our staff on that transition plan. They do this work every day. We have a union workforce, so we had to get them their buy-in from going from the gas powered that they had used for many, many years to some of this electric equipment. What may work best for us to transition this, and that we were going to do this in stages, and really speaking to them about some of those other things that were mentioned for the employee themselves, the vibration, the noise, the emissions, just the safety factors involved. So we really got that buy-in, and they were eager to go and try that. So we identified some properties that we thought we could make that more easy transition. And we started with the Town Hall complex. So in those of you in Lexington know that that's where we have Town Hall, our Cary Hall, which has a number of special events and meeting rooms, and the police station, and also the area where we have our farmers market and things like that. So really looking at that piece of it to see how we could implement switching to electric equipment and showing what we could do. We did a lot of equipment demos, and I would recommend that for anybody. There's a lot of equipment out there. The vendors were very good about letting us try out equipment. The workshops that Dan's going to put on tomorrow, take a look at that. Once we found equipment we thought would work for us, then purchasing that equipment. And in the course of using it, we wanted to evaluate that equipment. And we actually changed manufacturers after 1 year from one brand of string trimmer to another. String trimmers was really where we started. They're used throughout the whole town anyway. It was an easier implement to go ahead and get into the electric equipment area. So we have eliminated all of our gas-powered string trimmers and now use all electric. So not just in that downtown area that I mentioned, but all throughout all of our properties through town. So that was an easy one to do. We've also transitioned to electric push mowers for those smaller lawn areas. We have transitioned using electric leaf blowers from May until September, October. And they worked very well for us during that time period. And we got approved in this year's budget, and we actually just got the purchase order. We're purchasing 2 ride-on electric mowers, again, to use in that downtown area. So we're really trying to see where we can implement it, but doing this in stages. One of the things that we are also doing is working with other municipalities, with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, looking at getting some more grants available for municipalities to do this. So that would help with purchasing equipment, with tool barns, with education, with training and things of that nature. So if you go to the next slide, Jamie. So I'll just highlight a few of the things that we're doing here. So as I mentioned, that downtown complex. So if you look and follow Massachusetts Avenue down, our goal is to now expand down to where our library is, which is right over where you see Clark Street, where you see the Depot Place. We have a park area there, and transition it over to our 2 main historic areas in town, the Battle Green and the Visitor Center. We chose the downtown really to start because one, that's where there's a lot of people. So our impact in reducing noise, emissions and things like that is going to be very high. So that was an area that we thought we would target and show people that this can be done. So if we go to the next slide. So that's one of our electric push mowers in that area. Next one. There's one of our electric string trimmers that we're using. And if we go to the next one, that's one of our handheld electric blowers. And like I say, we use that for the bulk of the season. The next slide. So this gas-powered piece of equipment will have those new mowers in place for next year. So we'll be taking this out of this mix in this area and using those electric ride-on mowers that are about this size for us to do. So next slide, Jamie. So Dan had showed this. This is actually from our report that went to the selectmen. So as you can see, it talked about, just implementing some of these practices, some changes that we can make, both for annual and cumulative since we started introducing this program. So we think that this has been a real benefit for the employees and for the town. And we're finding that the costs over time are more of a benefit than they are a detriment. So we're implementing this program. The next slide. So future plans, again, we want to expand into some of the additional properties, looking for that AGSA certification. We are purchasing the larger electric mowers. We're going to look at some of our other equipment like chainsaws and things like that. I should have mentioned we do have electric hedge trimmers now. So, one of the things we're looking at is in emergencies, the reliability of the electric equipment for trees and roads and wires and things like that. But we are looking at these things on an ongoing basis to see where we can add equipment as we go. And then again, working with the MAPC. So that's kind of what I had. Again, the grant, these are some of the things that we're looking for it to do for municipalities. We do operate on the state contract. And, we're asking other communities to support us in this initiative. So, so with that, I will turn it back to you, Trish.
Fantastic, Dave. Thanks. And next, we're grateful to have Wellesley DPW Director Dave Cohen with us, and he's going to talk about progress in Wellesley. Thanks, Dave.
Hold on, Dave.
Thanks, Trish. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'm going to give you a brief overview of our Park and Tree Division's maintenance maintenance program, a snapshot of some of the equipment we use, our experience with battery-powered equipment so far, and then our planned next steps. The bottom line for us is that the switch to battery-powered equipment, at least for some of our equipment, is very doable. And based on what we just heard from Lexington, making the switch may not be as hard as we once thought. The map you see here shows our maintenance zones throughout town. The town is about 10 square miles in area. Next slide, please. Here are some statistics to give you a sense of our maintenance responsibility. As you can see, we have about 640 acres of passive recreation areas. This includes walking paths, parks, and conservation areas. We also have about 255 acres of active recreation areas, including playing fields, playgrounds, courts, and the town's pond and beach area. In addition to that, we maintain over 6,000 public shade trees, and in partnership with the town's Natural Resources Commission, we plant about 100 trees each year. We also maintain other areas, including municipal parking lots and over 60 landscape traffic islands. Next slide. To take care of all that, we have a staff of 17 landscape and tree care professionals, and they use a wide variety of equipment to get the job done on a daily basis. Our equipment roster includes, as you see here, 18 blowers, 35 trimmers, and 25 chainsaws. We have lots of other equipment to get the job done, but for the purpose of electrification, we're first focusing on these units. As you just heard Dave mention, line trimmers particularly seems like some low-hanging fruit. Next slide. Here's some action photos showing our horticultural technician, Wally Caban, demonstrating a couple of the units that we purchased last year to try out some of the battery-powered equipment. Although some of our folks are looking forward to trying more equipment, others are still skeptical. The concerns that I hear most frequently are related to durability and battery life needed to get the job done. Next slide. So from our limited sort of pilot test that we've done so far, we have some key feedback and takeaways. In general, we found the battery-powered units to be lighter and quieter than the similar gas-powered units. In our experience, a fully charged battery will make it through a typical full day of intermittent use. And although if you use it continuously, you'll get a lot less than that, maybe 45 minutes to an hour if you keep your finger on the trigger the whole time. Our test units in general have received overall positive feedback. And as I mentioned, the biggest concerns are durability, reliability, battery life, and being heavy duty enough to get the job done. Next slide. So the next steps for us, as I mentioned, focusing on line trimmers, handheld blowers, and chainsaws. To help move the initiative forward, we've included a line item in our FY22 budget to help accelerate the purchase and replacement of equipment, along with the chargers and batteries needed. Second, we're also keeping an eye out for advancements with bigger equipment, such as mowers, and we're looking forward to demoing those units in the year ahead to see what's available. And then finally, we're taking a look at the feasibility of establishing green zones in Wellesley to further promote the use of cleaner, quieter equipment for landscape maintenance. This kind of initiative can help us raise more awareness for this topic and also help us stretch out of our comfort zone in making our community a healthier place to be. In the meantime, we remain open to new advancements. We're looking forward to the new technology that's coming down the road. Overall, what we're finding is that the experience of transitioning to battery-powered equipment may not be so shocking. Thank you. Back to you, Trish.
Thanks so much, Dave. And I'm just going to move along now through the program. We have members of the new green business sector, which is fast growing in Massachusetts and nationwide, who will talk about how investing to reduce noise, pollution, and their carbon footprints has led to success in business. First, welcome George Carrette, owner of EcoQuiet Lawn Care in Concord, Mass. Thanks, George.
Hey there. So thank you very much for allowing me to have this time. So this is the first slide and it shows pretty much nothing. So can we go to the next one? So yes, we were founded in 2014 and we built a relationship with AGSA and quiet communities from the start. I started just out of college as a 22-year-old and got into this industry, and they've been instrumental in educating me and helping me develop in this budding industry. It has changed an enormous amount from the start. At one point I was using Ryobi homeowner rated battery electric tools that were probably 1/3 as powerful as what I currently use. So it's been amazing to grow and develop as this technology has been developing, and it's really made it seem like every single year it has been easier and easier to really perform the ideal that we've been trying to push from the get-go. Next slide. So yeah, the biggest reason why we started EcoQuiet Lawn Care, me and one of my friends sat down and he decided to go with a separate business, and I actually went and looked at electric landscaping as one of his businesses that I threw away. It made a lot of sense because I wanted to stay in my hometown of Concord, and they banned water bottles, and I really knew that these environmentalists existed and they wanted a business like this to exist. So I had some stock money left over from college and everything because I was interested in business myself. And I invested $20,000, most of that in the mower, which was a WBX33 HD from Mean Green, and a very mediocre truck, and a couple of leaf blowers, weed whackers, and other things like that. And we got started, and we really saw an explosion from the get-go because almost nobody had seen it at that point. And the one part that's like saddens me is that I still look around and I'm almost shocked, no pun intended, that I'm still one of the few around, though there's plenty of others like TJ Collins and Go Green that are starting to emerge, and I find that really encouraging. Next slide. So in general, we have very price competitive offerings. When it comes down to the lawnmowers, they're more expensive by a considerable margin, but we're not spending a large amount of money on gas. And actually, infrastructurally, we don't really have to maintain them too much unless something breaks. So it's a really clean process. You charge them, you get going, and it's really great. So our most price competitive product, I would say, is the lawn mowing. Fall cleanups, they tend to be a bit more expensive than gasoline, leaf blowing, and cleanups because of the power difference. But it's not something that's so considerable. And if you add in the value of having a much quieter product and a much more enjoyable product, it is really impactful. Earlier this season, I was listening to some people do spring cleanups, and they had something called a tornado blower that literally shook my house and my windows were rattling. It's a 10,000 CFM gas push behind mower. And that was the moment that I really realized this is why my company exists, besides just the environmental aspects that really reverberate with me. So that was the biggest thing that I realized there, that it's worth the added 25% more to not have your whole neighborhood get very angry at you. Next slide. So these are the towns we service. We're expanding a lot. We tripled our revenue this year, and it was really remarkable because we normally do not do any advertisement. This was the first time we did advertisement, and people really want to have this service happen. So one thing I would go and say that would make it easier for your other landscapers to go and do it is basically, I would say only probably 10% of people would be considering going to electric. And if you have a landscaper that was considering going electric, maybe help them sign up a neighborhood or a denser population of clients, because that is right there something that they can be more cost competitive to everybody, because you're taking away driving time, which also contributes to carbon. And it allows us to form and be more compassionate to other landscapers and help other people move into this sector. Because though I'm a businessman, I would love to see next slide. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, there are some challenges that really happen with electric landscaping. There is a high upfront cost for the batteries on lawnmowers, even though I've never lost money in a single year, and we've been growing our company pretty steadily for the last 6 years. There is a lack of competition, though it saddens me for the environmentalist I am. It's actually very good for business, and it means that all these other landscapers, if you can pitch it to them as an opportunity, can really get into this. And this is especially important, what I've noticed from younger landscapers and younger entrepreneurs, that they've gone and contacted me from Newport, from Florida, from Texas, asking about this. And I've always deferred them to AGSA and Quiet Communities because they have more facilities to help them with that. But it's really encouraging seeing this new generation of entrepreneurs get into this. So along with that, you know, we have to have a warehouse or a breaker that is good enough to charge a large amount of batteries. I believe in having an abhorrent amount of batteries. That's just my personal way I like to operate. I like to operate with 3 to 4 days of batteries at one time, because I find the idea of charging at people's houses and everything just clunky and not as practical. So I've never really worried about the money about it, and I've really never seen any lack of profit at the end too. So when you're growing a company as aggressive as I have, and you're still having profit even with higher cost, it means maybe it's worth it. Next slide. So these are the electric tools that we use currently. So all these electric tools, currently we use grid power, but the thing is, the real benefit of using grid power rather than an internal combustion engine, or some people even said a generator, is a lot of our energy comes from hydroelectric, solar. I know at least 60% of my energy currently comes from renewable sources, and we're actually looking for a provider to buy 100% renewable. And even if you were to use something like natural gas, just because it's a large facility that can use the energy from basically the thermal energy that gets wasted in an internal combustion engine, it's so much more efficient that even if you were to use coal or natural gas, you would still have a large carbon decrease from your electric usage. So it's really the perfect thing in all ways for the environment. Next slide. So there's a lot of new innovations that I'm excited about with electric landscaping. We personally ordered 3 Tesla Cybertrucks, and I think this is the new revolution that would really go and push electric, because it allows a 200 kilowatt hour battery bank that you can go and seamlessly go from taking your battery, using it in the field, to charging it right there. It reduces the clunkiness of going to your shop, taking batteries in and out. And I know my employees are really excited. We had a lot of employees from Brightview and other landscaping and tree companies that they were used to gas all the time. They loved they almost loved the fumes and the masculine properties of it, but now they're very gung-ho about what we're doing here and how we're pushing things forward. So yet again, I'd like to thank Quiet Communities and AGSA for this opportunity, and all of you too. So thank you very much.
Thanks, George. And now I'd like to introduce Priscilla. Before I do, she will be our last small business person, and then we'll take a couple of questions, and then
Trying to change it up a little bit.
okay. And then Dan will do his demonstrations, so we'll move things along. I'd like to welcome Priscilla Hutt-Williams, the founder of Pumpkin Brook Organic Gardening in Shirley, Mass. Thanks, Priscilla.
Thank you very much. This is always an enjoyable educational presentation, this community of electric users here, electric equipment users. I come from a little different angle on all of this. I started my business in 2001 as an all organic company using hand tools. Quiet, old-fashioned, yes, but effective. We gave everybody rakes and brooms to use, and we used those continually up to the present day. But I didn't buy any gas-powered equipment until 2007. I did not want to be known as a mow and blower. We do not do lawn care. Instead, we work with a lot of people on alternatives to lawn. Lawn is a pathway on some properties. And the clients said to me, well, the local landscaper didn't know what to do here. You know, they didn't understand us, but we love plants and we don't really want a lawn. So I said, well, I see familiar plants here. I'd be glad to help you. And the business has grown from that. But it seems these days we have more and more people who want us to take away turf and make beds for pollinators, and they want a fruit orchard, or they want a little home garden for growing vegetables and things. So this is definitely a trend that's on the rise, which is heartening. But our first gas equipment was a chipper so that we could make wood chip mulch, a sod cutter so we could take away the sod and make garden beds, a bed definer so we could edge properly the beds that were there, and a chainsaw for some of the small tree pruning and some of the storm cleanup that comes our way. And we have most of this equipment today because we use it very sparingly. We do not have blowers out every single day on the job. We certainly don't use a chainsaw every day or a sod cutter. These things are used only when needed and only sparingly. The hand tools are really our bread and butter, and they work hard for us, and we have to replace them often, but they're quiet and they're effective. In 2017, we did 2014, we bought our first electric blower, and our clients loved it because it sounded quiet like a vacuum cleaner. And our staff kind of got used to it too. And we enjoyed using it for cleanup of large pruning jobs. There were 4 of us would be pruning for a day on a property. We'd have a lot of little twigs everywhere. This was so handy to clean up. And if they happened to have gravel mulch, it was even better for that cleanup because the rake and the broom were not really cleaning up too well. We added 3 other blowers in 2017, and we continue a 4th one this year, and we continue to use them, again, sparingly when needed. I've also found the blowers particularly effective on a bank, on a mass planting, say of a real leaf catcher low shrub like cotoneaster or low juniper, things like that. And some of these clients with no lawn or hardly any do not have lawn services coming in, so they depend on us for their leaf cleanup. And I have to say about the question of mulch, blowing away the mulch in the fall is probably one of the worst things that can be done, because winter's coming and plants do need a layer of something to protect them against the heaving, cycles of freezing and thawing in winter. But if the soil is, so even some of the soil is blown away and it's what I call bald in that bed, it can be very, very damaging. And in this area, as we know, some winters we don't have much snow cover, and that's when a lot of the winter loss will occur. And in a season like this, where we've had drought, the plants are already under stress. So you can see it's kind of a snowball bad effect next spring when there's a lot of things dead in the landscape. So instead, we have another piece of gas-powered equipment that's used sparingly, and that's a leaf shredder. And I'm waiting for the day when there'll be an electric leaf shredder that we could use spring and fall to make mulch, close the loop, and reuse that product on site. Is particularly lovely in a woodland garden or in a garden where everything is planted quite closely, particularly the perennials. The stalks will hold the leaf mulch in place quite nicely. It will break down and enrich the soil over time. So I'm waiting for the day when that kind of a product will come out and we can retire the gas-powered leaf shredder that we have at the moment. So anyway, a little insight into how we've grown over the years, and I haven't even mentioned NOFA, Organic Land Care. Jamie Banks had that logo up there. NOFA, Organic Land Care Standards, started around the same time I started my business, and I worked on writing them and on developing the first professional training course, which is still going on. And the standards have been revised now 6 times, and this last edition included a section on electric equipment that Jamie was involved in writing. And it also the same section talks about climate change and all the related health risks that we've talked about tonight. So I encourage you to look for those at organiclandcare.net. The standards are available to anyone who wants to read them. But that has been one of the cornerstones of our business as well. And when the electric equipment came along, I thought, well, it dovetails perfectly with our mission and our purpose, and let's get into it. So there we are. So thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thanks so much, Priscilla. And I think because we're running a little late, to move things along, we're going to do the raffle first and then move to the live demonstrations with Dan. He said he would do just about 5 minutes. And then anyone who would like to stay on for questions, we have some really great questions, a couple of good ones. So feel free to stay on for that. So first, our exciting raffle. Dan, if you're on, can you tell us what this person is going to win?
Absolutely, I'm going to show it to you. This person is going to win an EGO 650 CFM handheld blower. It comes with a 5 amp hour battery. And then I'm going to give you guys just a little
Oh, yeah.
how quiet it is. Now, just keep in mind, this is a residential model. However, George from Eco Quiet Lawn Care is actually using it in his commercial application. And we can tell everybody for certain that these are so popular. The Ego handheld blowers are being used widely for commercial applications. So good luck to everybody, and hopefully you're going to be happy with it.
That's exciting, and I wish more of those were in use in my neighborhood, I can say. And the winner is John Mantak. If you're on, John, please just write your name in the chat so that we know you're here. I don't think he is, so I'm going to choose another name out of my hat. And it is Frederick Mann. If you're on, Frederick, please sign in the chat and we'll know you're here, and we can arrange to have it delivered or have it picked up. Okay, I'm going to continue. The next person is T. Roy. Is T. Roy on the line? If you are, please sign in the chat. Ugh. I don't want the person to suddenly show up, but I will choose another. We had 160 plus people register, and Edward Lau, if you're on the line, please sign in the chat. Yay. Edward is on, and he is our winner. So congratulations, enjoy your leaf blower. And Dan, if you would do the rest of the demonstrations, that would be great now. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trish. And we just want to really thank the folks at Ego for sending that over for us to give away to somebody. Thank you for supporting Ego. All right, so we're going to do a test. Can everybody see me here? Trish, can you see us? Yeah, I don't think so. We're going to have to do it with this.
I think it just greened up.
Okay, Trish, can you see us here? I
No,
don't think
she's
so, George.
making it green. No, it's green now. It's green. Why is it not going on?
All right. I think we should just default to this.
All right.
Can you guys see me and hear me?
Yes.
They said
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Okay, let's walk over and see what we have. All right, first of all, we have an extended head trimmer from Steel. It's an HLA 65. Comes with this small battery here, in and out. Very easy to adjust. Pull that down, and you get that full range of articulation, if you will. And then, just to give you guys a sample of how quiet it is compared to its gas counterpart. Leaf blowers are very loud, but pound for pound, two-stroke hedge trimmers actually are probably the most egregious offenders of noise pressure in this industry. Now, if we were doing a two-stroke hedge trimmer, you would hear that for miles away. Okay, next over here, we have some, of course, the Ego blower, the handheld blower that somebody just won. And what's great about this company is they have a dual certification, AFTC certification, because their residential tools have actually proven to perform.
Excuse me, Dan. If you can turn
We
off.
drop these batteries and we put them through torture, if you will. So I'm going to take this battery.
One second. I don't know.
Dan,
Did they have the video from you? And no, they don't have the audio from me. What's
so
happening?
I think if you turn off Dan's Zoom and you just go right to George, I think we
Okay,
might get better.
just turn it off. Can you hear this? Yeah, you can. Okay.
Okay. All right. So once again, the drop test, if you will. We're going to put it back in. And it's going to keep on going. So again, when you guys are doing your own research, ADSA doesn't take anybody's word for it. We have to test it ourselves. All of the tools here that you've seen have been subjected to very high heat conditions back in California. For example, we will charge and store these batteries in metal storage containers for 3-4 months at a time during summer, just to see how safe they are, first of all, and second of all, if there has been any ill effects on their performance and their longevity. But again, we really do want to encourage people to do their homework, go online, look for recalls, any safety issues, and really stress that warranty. I believe that the Ego Corporation gives a 3-5-year warranty on their residential tools. I believe that the Steel Corporation on their AP line, which is used residentially as well, they're going to have for residential use, their commercial tools should be a 3 to 5 year, and we'll confirm that with Hugh tomorrow. Here we have a 40-volt chainsaw, and this is actually George's. George uses this again in commercial settings for various applications. So George, did you want to speak to how this is being used?
Yeah, so that's mostly be used as a limmer. The thing that's really great about it is it has a auto sharpening feature right there. So if you actually kick back the chain right here, okay, rev it up, okay, and then hit that at the same time. So that's really great for keeping a really, really sharp saw when it comes to like ornamental pruning or things that you have to get the perfect cut. You know, we have other saws when it comes to bucking up logs that don't matter, but that's a saw we want to go to when it has to be sharp every single cut.
Awesome, George. Thank you for that. Okay, so another very popular tool is this Ego lawnmower. Okay, again, you're looking at a lawnmower that is being used commercially, but it's a residential lawnmower. I can say that these Ego lawnmowers are operating in several of our ADSA certified green zones as our Steels as well. But this is a very popular mower that has really withstood a lot of punishment in a commercial application. We do encourage you to, again, go online, check out this product. This is a self-propelled product, if you will. And I'll back up. How quiet it is. So we want people to realize, do not be fooled that quiet means it's not powerful. Trust me, the torque is there. So again, we do encourage you to take a look at all things electric, but what I really like about this model too is how it breaks down. And then you can just flip it up and store it like that as well, because of course it doesn't have any fluids, no gas or any oil. All right, George, if we can come this way. Now, we still have our Husqvarna auto mower from yesterday. However, we want everybody to know there are homeowner auto mowers on the market. Husqvarna is the most popular brand. I believe they've been out the longest in the auto mower for the auto mower technology. But we do see that it is starting to gain popularity in both the commercial sector as an augmenting mower for overall operations, but also, again, we're all gadget people now. You can go and buy these mowers, you hook up an app, and then you can just basically set it down, have it do its thing, kick back and drink some lemonade. So we definitely want people to look at robotics and consider that it might be something for your particular application, if you will. And one other thing about auto mowers in general is they are uber quiet. You are going to get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to noise reduction, hands down, out of any tool converting from gas to electric. And then finally we have a carbon fiber shaft Ego string trimmer. This is proven, again, to work well in both residential and commercial application. And George can attest to that as well as many others. This is just a joy to use. It's very light. So for people that may have some back issues or they don't like really heavy equipment, something like this with the carbon fiber shaft is going to be for you. Okay, again, we really thank everybody for joining us tonight. And I apologize about my battery issue earlier. I was able to finish all my slides. I'm sorry that I had to rush through the last few, but I do look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow who's going to attend the live demo. Steel will be there. Husqvarna will be there. Oregon's going to be featured. And then we have an outside shot of having a couple of mean green mowers being brought over by Casons. And I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow morning. And be sure to just go ahead and email me if you have any pointed questions. Again, AGSA always answers our emails and we always pick up the phone. And we just want to wish everybody a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie for some, a quick closing remark. And as we said, if you'd like to stay on for some questions, we'll do that. If you don't, we will do our best to look through the chat and respond. Thanks, Jamie.
Okay, thanks, Trish. Really quick, because thanks so much for your patience and hanging in there. Just to have some action items, what can residents do about, gas-powered equipment and making the transition? I'm not going to read through this, but there's certainly things, talking with neighbors and landscaping, sharing materials, creating a list of quiet landscapers in the town so people know that there are companies out there who will do this. George is one of them. There's not a lot, but hopefully this is a sector that's going to grow. And consider the residential green zone idea, either at your property or better yet, with neighbors and with contractors that can service multiple houses in that community and save money on their end and keep costs down on your end. And then what towns could do. Really talk with governing members in your town about these possibilities. This is totally possible. And we really want to make Massachusetts a leading light in this area. So supporting the MAPC technical assistant request, your town can do this. They're under no obligation to participate, but simply expressing their support and saying, this is a good idea. Dave Pinsonneau has letter templates. He can correspond. Lexington is taking the lead on this. Creating models within towns of clean, quiet maintenance zones, AGSA green zones, so that more and more residents and landscapers become educated. And then partnering with other people that are doing this and promoting this so our communities are healthier and even quieter and even healthier places that we can live, work, and play. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate your participation. Anybody that wants to stay on and ask questions is welcome to. We will stay on and try and answer them to a point that's at least reasonable, and we get to the main questions. So thank you again.
Thanks. So for those who are staying on, I'll just pose, a few questions. Maybe we could just do this for 10 minutes, but there are some good ones. Jamie, this question is probably for you. The towns that you've worked with, have any had success regulating gas-powered leaf blower use?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we favor a carrot and stick model, and really more the carrot than the stick, but reasonable regulations can push things in the right direction, but there has to be at the other end the carrot, and that involves education, financial incentives, professional certification, things needed that help to pull and grow that business sector. I would say that the towns in Westchester County might be a very good example, Westchester County, New York, that have regulations and are now looking to educate landscapers, have them transition so that they can grow a business sector within the county. And Dan, would you like to add to that? Let me just say, Lexington, Lexington, of course, as Dave and Nick mentioned, is another example here in Massachusetts.
And, I'll just kind of echo what you said there as far as there needs to be a balance. Because the industry, the gas industry, they do feel attacked a lot of times. And I really feel that we all need to do a good job to understand each other. Sometimes AGSA sees ourselves in the middle. We know both sides. I come from the gas industry myself, and I tell them, look, I cannot stand this, and we can do better. And we just need to do it in prudent steps. And I do like that you mentioned outreach to the industry to provide them resources. For the most part, I see that a lot of them really do want to go in that direction. I'll just give you one example. A lot of the interactions with the gardeners, like the Mow, Blow, and Go guys, and some of them that speak English as a second language, Spanish is their first language, they'll tell me after using the electric tools, rather than gas, they'll go home and they won't have to take their clothes off in the garage and just run to the bathroom. They can basically go home and enter their houses not smelling like gas all day. So yes, that's my add-on to that, is to continue to work together. We reach out to them, we provide our expertise and some of the ways to succeed. And then at the same time, they need to also be receptive to doing this line of work in a new way. So.
Thanks. And a question for Dave Pinsino or Dave Cohen, if you are still on. I'm wondering what the response to using electric equipment has been in the community. And then a second part is, do you think that if the town starts using electric equipment that residents will follow?
I can speak to here in Lexington. So we have gotten positive public feedback with the program that we've implemented. A lot of questions, a lot of good questions. And we are hoping that, if we're able to implement this from a municipal standpoint on municipal grounds, that it'll make it easier for both residents and landscapers to go ahead and try this approach. So we're hoping it will lead to some of that. And again, we're looking to expand what we're doing as well, but we've had positive feedback so far.
Terrific. Dave Cohen, do you have anything to add, or I'll go on? I have 2 more questions.
Just quickly, so we're just starting to dip our toes in the water, as I mentioned, so haven't received any feedback from residents yet, but exactly what Dave said, we're looking to take on a leadership role here and lead by example. So that's our hope as we move forward.
Terrific. And this may be for Dan. What's the best place for homeowners to purchase equipment?
I would say you can go to big box stores, online. There's online resources, big box stores. I know that there's a nice chain of, I believe, Ace Hardware stores that carry some of the brands that you saw tonight. One thing you do want to do, though, is when you purchase a tool, make sure you're purchasing it from a place where you can have adequate aftermarket service after you purchase that tool. But the big box, the Home Depots, the Lowe's, and Ace, True Value, and then a lot of these manufacturers now also have their dealer network. So again, go online and do your research, and a lot of them have where you can plug in your zip code, and then they'll have a lot of different options for you to purchase throughout their distribution model.
Great.
I'd like to add something, Trish, that wasn't mentioned, but that is important. Within manufacturers' lines of tools, the batteries are interchangeable. So you're getting economies from buying like a suite of tools, or certainly more than one. When you do that, you can switch the battery from, for instance, the Ego mower to any of the hand tools and between the hand tools.
Yeah, and just a quick add-on to that, the people that are creating green zones, some of them don't want to use anything motorized. They're doing it all people-powered, but some people are buying like bundles of tools to achieve an actual green zone on their property, and that coincides with what Jamie just mentioned, how advantageous that is to purchase more, and it's more economic.
Okay, and one last quick question, although there are some others that we can respond to after this. But is anyone using plug-in equipment?
Well, from our experience, absolutely. A lot of our residential green zones are using a combination of plug-in and people-powered, plug-in and battery, but plug-in is still out there. And for smaller yards, it's very enjoyable to use and very practical. We just don't recommend plugins being used around pools.
Yes, that sounds wise. And can you just quickly, one more time, Dan, just say the brands that we saw tonight so that people are familiar with the brands, please?
Yeah, we saw a combination of Ego, Steel, Husqvarna, and we saw an Oregon 40-volt chainsaw tonight.
Great. So we are going to make a video of this presentation available to all participants, and we'll also post it on Sustainable Wellesley and the other sites, Lexington, and the nonprofits involved. So I will just say the final thank you for joining us, and have a good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.